The sun was melting into the Pacific when everything changed. I was sitting on the small balcony of my rented villa in Maui, barefoot, a soft breeze brushing over my legs. Below me, the ocean breathed in long, gentle waves. My trip had been peaceful so far. A week of quiet walks, coconut coffee in the mornings, and the sweet illusion that life was finally simple. Then my phone buzzed on the table beside my half-empty glass of pineapple juice. One new email. From Dad. Henry Cooper, subject. Transfer complete. At first, I smiled. My father rarely used email. He was a man of paper bills, paper contracts, paper rules. If he had written, it must have been something important about the family business. I opened it, expecting a short note about an investment or maybe a tax document. What I saw instead froze me. We have sold all your property, you can't do anything, and are moving to another country. The money is already out, Dad. I read it twice, my eyes burning. My first reaction was disbelief, a strange, hollow laugh that didn't sound like me. I thought maybe it was a prank or a wrong message, but my father wasn't the joking type. He was always calculating, always certain. Slowly, the words sank in like stones. Sold all your property. I whispered the words aloud, hoping they would sound less final. They didn't. My mind scattered through memories, our red brick house in Denver, the one with the leaning oak tree, and the fence my father swore he'd fix each spring. The little apartment I'd bought in Seattle when I started freelancing, and the small cabin by a quiet Oregon lake where I used to write and think. A few years ago, my parents had convinced me to combine everything under one company name. It'll be easier to manage, sweetheart, my mother, Ellen, had said. We're family. We trust each other. At 28, I'd wanted to believe her. At 31, sitting in a Hawaiian sunset, I realized how foolish that trust had been. Then came another notification, this one from my banking app. Incoming transfer, $55 million US. My breath caught. $55 million. For a moment, I thought the screen must have glitched. I blinked, checked again, and felt my pulse quicken as the numbers stayed steady, shining back at me. My father had transferred the money, their money, into my personal account by mistake. That was when everything aligned. The sale of my properties, the strange tone of the email, their sudden talk of moving abroad. It wasn't confusion. It was intent. They had liquidated everything I owned and tried to take it with them. But one wrong digit, one small clerical error, had sent it all to me instead. I stared at the water until my eyes blurred. My parents, Henry and Ellen Cooper, were ambitious people, the kind who believed success was owed to them. My mother had grown up in Boston, where money and manners held equal weight. My father had built a modest real estate company that sometimes felt more like an empire of pride. Together, they lived for growth, never satisfaction. They wanted more, always more, and now they decided the easiest way to have it was to cut me out entirely. For a long time, I couldn't move. The tropical air felt suddenly heavy, the sound of the waves too loud. I thought about the last time I saw them, a dinner in Denver 3 months earlier. My mother had worn a pearl necklace and smiled too tightly. My father had spent half the evening on his phone, mumbling about buyers in London. When I asked what he meant, he said, "You wouldn't understand, Julie. It's business." Business, apparently, that included erasing me. I don't know how long I sat there, but when the wind picked up and scattered napkins from the nearby cafe, something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to let them finish what they'd started. I picked up my phone and called my bank. After 3 rings, a calm male voice answered. "Good evening. This is Marcus Reed at Evergreen Bank. How can I help you today?" "Hi," I said, my voice trembling but determined. I just received a transfer of $55 million. It was sent by mistake from my parents' company account. I need to freeze everything immediately. There was a pause long enough for me to hear him swallow. "Did you say $55 million, ma'am?" "Yes," I said. "And it's in my name." "All right, Ms. Cooper," he replied, his tone shifting to professional urgency. "Please verify your details for me. Address, recent transactions, security questions." I answered each one. my hands sweating despite the breeze. When he confirmed my identity, he said quietly, "You currently have full control over the account. If you wish, I can lock all movement, no withdrawals, no transfers, until you instruct otherwise." "Do it," I said quickly. "Freeze everything." "You understand, that will include you as well," he reminded me. "You won't be able to access the funds." "I understand," I said, though the words felt like swallowing glass. "Just lock it." "Consider it done," he said after a few clicks of the keyboard. "The account is secure. If anyone attempts to move or dispute the funds, we'll contact you directly." When the call ended, I felt an odd calm. My parents had meant to strip me of everything. Instead, they'd given me the one thing they couldn't buy, control. I wasn't sure what to do next, but I knew the first step had been taken. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I walked down to the beach barefoot, the sand cool and smooth beneath my feet. The ocean stretched endlessly black and silver under the moon. Somewhere across that water, maybe even now, my parents were boarding a plane, believing their plan had succeeded. I imagined them smiling, planning their new lives in Europe, Portugal, or maybe France, thinking I was still the obedient daughter who would never fight back. I sat on the wet sand and watched the horizon. For years, I had built my life around their approval, studied the subjects they liked, invested where they told me, kept quiet when they dismissed my ideas. I thought loyalty was love. But love without honesty is just control in a prettier dress. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt awake, like the truth had finally pulled me out of some long dream. When dawn came, the sky was streaked with pale rose and gold. I returned to the villa, packed my suitcase, and booked the earliest flight back to the mainland. My mind kept repeating one sentence: they sold everything I owned. But beneath that horror was another thought, one I almost didn't want to admit. They can't touch me now. As the plane rose above the Pacific hours later, I looked out the window at the shrinking island. Somewhere deep inside me, beneath the shock and anger, something like strength was stirring. My parents had always believed I was soft, incapable of standing on my own. They were wrong. The transfer, that single mistaken click, had exposed the truth about them and about me. It had also handed me the power they'd spent their whole lives hoarding. And for the first time, as the clouds swallowed the last edge of Hawaii, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready. I spent most of the flight back from Hawaii staring out the window, watching clouds move like slow ships across the sky. My mind replayed the same sequence over and over. The email, the transfer, my trembling hands as I froze the account. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that number, $55,000,000, burning against the dark. It didn't feel real, but the fear did. When the plane landed in Los Angeles, I switched on my phone. There were 10 missed calls and 21 unread messages. Half of them were from my parents. The rest were from unknown numbers. I deleted them all without reading. I wasn't ready for whatever excuses or manipulations they had prepared. By the time I arrived in Seattle, it was raining. Of course it was. The city had a way of matching my moods. The streets were wet, silvered under streetlights, and the sound of the rain felt like an argument I didn't want to join. I took a cab to my apartment, the one place that was still truly mine, though I wasn't sure for how long. If my parents had sold the property tied to my name, how much of my life still belonged to me? Inside, the air was stale. The plants I'd left behind looked tired. The kitchen smelled faintly of old coffee, and my answering machine blinked red. I let it blink. I didn't need to hear my father's voice just yet. I made tea, sat at the counter, and opened my laptop. The first email waiting for me had the subject line, "Urgent, family matter." It was from my father. "Julie, you have to call us. There's been a mistake with the transfer. The funds were meant for a partner in London. We need access to the account immediately. You don't understand what's at stake. This is not your money." I closed the message before finishing it. Not my money. How strange, when the properties they'd sold were all purchased under my name. My father's business logic had always been selective, his ethics even more so. I opened another email, this one from my mother, Ellen. Her words were gentler, but just as manipulative. Sweetheart, we love you. We only wanted to secure the future for all of us. There was confusion in the process. Please don't make things worse. We're in New York, trying to leave for Portugal tomorrow, but everything depends on that transfer being corrected. Portugal, so that was their destination. It made sense. Europe had always been their dream escape. Cheaper taxes, beautiful coastlines, and no one to question how they'd built their fortune. I stared at the screen until my tea went cold. They hadn't asked if I was okay. They hadn't apologized. They'd simply demanded what they thought was theirs. I clicked over to the bank portal again. Marcus Reed, the banker I had spoken to, had followed up with a formal message confirming the freeze. Ms. Cooper, as requested, your account is locked from all outgoing and incoming transfers until further notice. Any inquiries from the senders will be routed directly to you. Please note, you are the legal account holder. That last line, the legal account holder, gave me a strange kind of power. My parents couldn't undo this without my permission. For once, I was the gatekeeper, not the dependent. Still, the situation terrified me. I had no idea what $55 million meant in the real world. Taxes, investigations, lawsuits, it all spun in my head like storm debris. I needed advice. So I called Olivia Gray, my best friend since college. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and sleepy. Julie, you vanished on me. I was beginning to think you found some surfer in Hawaii and started a new life. I wish, I said. My laugh came out brittle. Something happened. I can't explain everything right now, but my parents transferred a huge sum of money into my account, by accident. $55 million. There was a long silence. Then, softly, Julie, are you serious? Yes. And now they're demanding I send it back, but it's complicated. They sold everything I own without telling me. My properties, my savings, all gone. This money is what's left of it. I froze the account. Good, she said immediately. Don't trust them. I never liked how your dad talked to you. Always like you were a business deal instead of his daughter. I smiled faintly. Olivia had a way of grounding me. They'll try everything. I know them. I just don't know what to do legally. Then get a lawyer, she said. A smart one. And don't answer another email from them without advice. It was the best suggestion I'd heard all day. The next morning, I found a local firm downtown, Cole and Avery Legal, specializing in financial disputes. The partner who met me was a composed woman named Hannah Cole, maybe in her 40s, with dark glasses and the calm of someone who'd seen every kind of chaos. So, she said, flipping through my printed documents, your parents sold your assets, moved the proceeds into their company account, then transferred it to you accidentally? Exactly. And you froze the money? Yes. She looked up, and a small approving smile touched her lips. Smart move. They can't touch it now. What you need next is documentation proving ownership of the properties they sold. If they were under your name and the sale was without consent, you have leverage. A lot of it. I don't want to ruin them, I said quietly. I just don't want to be ruined myself. Understandable, Hannah said. But from what I can see, they already did the ruining. You're just holding the evidence. She drafted a letter to my parents that afternoon. Polite, professional, but firm. It explained that I had retained legal representation and that all communication must go through her office. She also requested full disclosure of sale documents for every property I owned. By evening, I received my father's reply, not to her, but to me. How could you do this, Julie? You've humiliated us. We built that fortune for our family. You're our daughter, not our enemy. We trusted you. I almost laughed at the irony. They trusted me? I didn't respond. Instead, I turned off my phone and sat by the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the city lights reflected in puddles like small galaxies. I thought of the ocean in Hawaii, the moment everything had shifted, and how impossible it was to go back to who I'd been before that email. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of losing them. I was afraid of losing myself again. I poured another cup of tea, breathing slowly. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably in a hotel near JFK Airport, arguing with each other, plotting their next move. Maybe they'd even blame each other for the mistake. That was how they worked. Alliances when convenient, betrayal when profitable. But I had changed the rules. The river of money that had always flowed through their hands was frozen solid, and the ice was mine to break when I decided. I didn't know yet what my next step would be, but I knew one thing for certain. They weren't getting a single dollar without facing what they'd done. I stood at the window, watching the city shimmer under the streetlights, and whispered to myself, "It's my turn now." And for the first time in my life, those words felt true. The world felt strangely quiet after I hired Hannah, my lawyer. Days slipped by like slow water, each one heavy with waiting. I knew my parents wouldn't disappear quietly. They had built their lives on control, controlling people, deals, and especially me. Losing their grip, even for a moment, must have felt like drowning. 2 mornings after Hannah sent her formal notice to them, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. The screen glowed with the name I had been both expecting and dreading. Dad. For a moment, I just stared at it. The call ended, then another began almost immediately, this time for Mom. I didn't answer that one either. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, made a pot of coffee, and tried to ignore the tightness in my chest. But silence, I realized, was also a kind of answer. And my parents weren't the kind of people who accepted silence for long. By noon, the messages started coming in. Call us immediately. There has been a misunderstanding. You're making a mistake you'll regret. We're in New York now. We need that money released. This is your duty as our daughter. That last line cut deep. Duty. That word had been the spine of my childhood. I owed them gratitude, obedience, silence. Duty had been their invisible chain around my neck. But now I was learning what it felt like to live without it, and the freedom was both terrifying and beautiful. When the video call request appeared on my screen, I hesitated. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out every rational thought. I almost ignored it, but a part of me, the one that still needed closure, pressed accept. Their faces filled my screen, framed by the bright chaos of an airport lounge. Behind them, a large departures board listed flights to Paris, Berlin, and Lisbon. I recognized the logo of the John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. So they really were leaving. My father looked older, the way people do when control slips through their fingers. His once perfectly combed silver hair was messy, his jaw clenched. My mother's lipstick was smudged, her pearl earrings slightly uneven. Together, they looked like people who had expected champagne and found vinegar. "Julie," my father said first, his voice sharp and demanding. "What have you done?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "What have I done?" I repeated slowly. "I froze the account. I protected what's mine." My mother leaned closer, eyes wide and glistening. "You don't understand. We sold everything. The Denver house, the cabin in Oregon, your apartment in Seattle. All of it is tied up in that money. We were planning to move to Portugal and start fresh. You knew this." I shook my head. "No, I didn't. You told me we were restructuring. You didn't tell me you were selling my life behind my back. And you definitely didn't tell me you were running away with the profits." My father's jaw tightened. "It was a mistake, Julie. The transfer was supposed to go to a company in London. You know how these things work. One wrong account number, simple human error. You're overreacting." His tone, so measured and patronizing, triggered every buried memory. Him explaining my own finances as if I were a child. Him laughing when I questioned his business methods. "You already hurt me," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "You didn't just take my money. You sold the life I built. The only mistake you made was typing the wrong number." My mother reached out toward the screen, her hand trembling. "Honey, we're family. This isn't about betrayal. It's about trust. Your father did what he thought was best for all of us. He's always taken care of you." The irony of it nearly made me laugh. "You took care of me by selling everything in my name?" My father cut in, his patience gone. "Enough. You will release that money at once. We raised you, educated you, paid for every comfort you've ever had. Without us, you'd still be waiting tables or painting for pennies. You owe us this. There was again that word, oh. They had spent my entire life making sure I believed that my success was their gift, that every step I took was borrowed from their generosity. But something inside me had shifted. The woman sitting in that villa in Hawaii had vanished the moment the email came through. What remained was someone stronger, someone who finally saw the manipulation for what it was. I don't owe you anything, I said quietly. You taught me how to work, yes. You paid for my education, yes. But I repaid that 1,000 times over in loyalty and silence. You used me as the face of your business, signed my name on papers I didn't understand, and called it family. That's not love. That's ownership. My father's face darkened. My mother tried to speak, but he raised a hand to silence her. You'll regret this, Julie, he said. You think freezing that money makes you powerful? It doesn't. You're playing with things you don't understand. We have partners, contracts, expectations. Do you know how many people will come after you when they realize what you've done? For a moment, fear rippled through me. But then I remembered Hannah's calm assurance. You are the legal owner. No one can touch that account without your consent. I understand enough, I said. And I'm not afraid of your partners. You made this mess, not me. My father exhaled sharply, like a man trying to control his temper. When you see sense, you'll call. Until then, enjoy your little fantasy of independence. It won't last. I smiled faintly. It already has. And before either of them could reply, I pressed end call. For a few seconds, their frozen faces lingered on the screen, shocked, furious, desperate. Then the image disappeared, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the dark glass. My eyes looked different, harder, clearer. I sat there for a long time, the silence thick around me. My coffee had gone cold. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look. Instead, I walked to the window. Outside, the Seattle sky was painted in deep blue and gold, the rain clouds breaking apart. It felt like the world was finally exhaling with me. I thought about everything my parents had said, their insistence, their anger, their fear. It wasn't just about the money. It was about losing me. For years, I had been their silent shareholder, their compliant daughter, their emotional insurance policy. Without me, they had no one left to manipulate. Maybe that's what terrified them the most. I turned off my phone entirely and left it on the kitchen counter. Then I sat on the couch and opened my notebook. I started writing, not about money or property or betrayal, but about the woman I wanted to be from now on. One who chose herself, even when it hurt. One who stopped mistaking control for care. The rain started again, tapping softly against the windows. But this time, it sounded peaceful. It sounded like freedom. And though I knew the war wasn't over, I also knew I'd already won the first battle. The next few weeks felt like living inside a storm that only I could see. On the outside, Seattle kept moving, cars, rain, people with umbrellas, but my world had narrowed down to one thing: decisions. Lawyers, banks, signatures. Every call, every meeting, every new document made me realize just how deeply my parents had tangled my life in theirs. My lawyer, Hannah Cole, was the calm in that storm. She met me in her downtown office overlooking gray streets and told me everything straight. Legally, the money is yours, she said, tapping the folder between us. The properties were registered under your name, and your parents' own email shows intent to remove you. That alone gives us the upper hand. I stared at the papers, still struggling to believe any of it. So, I could keep it all? You could, Hannah said, folding her hands. The question is, do you want to? That question haunted me. At night, I lay awake thinking about my parents somewhere across the ocean. I pictured them in a small apartment in Lisbon or Rome, staring at their locked bank account, their faces twisted with disbelief. They had built their lives around power, and now they had none. I wondered if they regretted what they'd done, or if they were still blaming me. I knew the answer before I could admit it. They weren't sorry. They never would be. So, I made my decision. I would keep what was rightfully mine, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. I needed to rebuild my life on my own terms, not as a daughter under their control, but as a woman standing alone. The first step was simple but symbolic. I kept the account frozen while Hannah completed every legal check possible. Then, once everything was confirmed, I moved most of the funds into a trust managed by an independent firm in New York. The account would be mine alone, untouchable by anyone but me. Still, I couldn't bring myself to erase my parents entirely. Some small, tired part of me wanted closure, not cruelty. So, I told Hannah to set aside $2 million, an offer they could accept once, under strict terms, with no further contact. It was my final gesture of grace. They refused. Their reply came in a furious string of emails. My father accused me of theft. My mother begged and threatened in the same breath. They called me ungrateful, heartless, lost. I read the first few, then deleted the rest. When Hannah asked how I wanted to respond, I said, "We don't. They've already told me everything I need to know." After that, I changed my phone number. I closed my old email account. I moved. I bought a small white house on a quiet hill outside Portland. It wasn't extravagant, just peaceful. The living room had big windows that filled the space with morning light, and the backyard was overgrown with wild roses that I decided to tend myself. The house cost $750,000, and for the first time in my life, I paid in cash, my money, my name, my signature. Every decision after that felt lighter. I opened a new design studio, one that belonged entirely to me, and built a scholarship fund of $5 million to help young women in America who wanted to study design, business, or law, but didn't have support. I wanted to give what I never really had, a start without strings attached. Freedom, I learned, doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like breathing. It feels like waking up in a quiet house and realizing no one owns your next move. Sometimes, though, the nights still get heavy. I'll sit in my kitchen with a cup of tea and wonder where my parents ended up. Maybe they're in Dublin now, arguing in a small rented flat. Maybe my father still blames the world. Maybe my mother still hopes I'll come back. But the truth is, I'm done living for people who only loved the parts of me they could control. I'm not angry anymore. Just finished. Their greed, their endless hunger for wealth, it stripped them of everything they thought mattered. They tried to take my future, and in doing so, they lost their place in it. I didn't steal their fortune. They gave it away when they chose money over me. This is how my story ends, not with a fight, but with peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop apologizing for surviving. My name is Julie Cooper. I live in America in my own house under my own name. I don't belong to anyone. And the money that once tried to ruin me? It doesn't own me anymore. I own it.